Hello and welcome to my video. For those who are new here, my name is Elenia and this is Soft Skill Atelier, where I teach you all the skills you need to bring your fashion ideas to life from concept to completion. Welcome to the first part of a new series on my channel. I call it Refresh Your Wardrobe. It is all about upcycling, fixing and altering your clothes so that your vintage and thrifted pieces look more fresh, well fitted and more contemporary. I got this beautiful Y2K Leoprint coat off of Depop. I love it so much. I got it for myself, even though I could kind of tell it will be too big for me, especially on the shoulders. But luckily, I know how to sew and how to make things fit. That's why I want to take you along with me and show you how I alter my coat step by step so you can do the same thing at home with your own clothes. With the techniques I'm going to show you, you could also alter a blazer or a jacket. I will give you more information about that later in the video. Because first we are going to take a proper look at my beautiful new coat I am going to work on today. Let's do it. The coat is obviously way too big all the way around and also on the sleeves. But what bothers me the most is that it gives me these massive shoulders. I do like the length and the color and obviously the fabric, but what also is bothering me is that the pockets mounted on the front part of the coat are fake. Why? Please anyone tell me, why is that a thing? Hashtag pockets for women's clothes. Of course, I cannot let that stay that way, and I will convert them into real pockets, that's for sure. So the goal for today's session is to alter the coat to a well-fitted piece that doesn't give us the oversized look anymore. Before we get started, I am giving you a quick overview over all the tools and materials we need for today's session. Scissors, if you have. Also a zigzag scissors. If not, it's also okay. Pins. We need a lot of pins today. Seam ripper. You can also use some tiny scissors. Fabric marker, the usual, whatever you have. Sewing yarn. I picked the black one so you can see what I'm doing. Set square, as always my favorite tool. I don't know what to do without it. Some thin fabric for the new pockets. So, if we have something that is too big, we usually are tempted to take the thing apart, take some fabric away and then sew it back together. What we need to be aware of with this technique is that while shortening the shoulder seams, the armhole gets bigger and the sleeve will not have the right fit anymore for the armhole. So my attempt I want to share with you for making the shoulders less wide is the following. Always find an option inside the pattern piece where you can take away some fabric without altering the outline of your pattern too much. Luckily my coat has a princess seam, which is this nice seam that has the bust dart incorporated in its design. I am using this seam to edit the width of my shoulder seam and the general width of my whole coat. The seam is ending at the height of the fake pockets, but that doesn't really bother us at the moment. The back part of my coat is also divided by an extra seam that starts in the middle of the shoulder seam and goes all the way down to the hemline. I not just want to make the shoulders more narrow, but the whole coat needs to be more slim to create a more fitted coat. So at first I will be eyeballing how much I want to take in the whole coat so that the shoulders look fine. Then the first thing I need to do is to access the seam inside the coat. For that I need to open the lining. I do that on the hem of the coat. That will give us the access we need to work on the seams from the inside. I sped up the time lapse 6 times faster and it still looks kinda slow. So I can tell you this is gonna take a while for sure. I recommend you to get comfortable to do the seam ripping, maybe while watching a movie or listening to an interesting podcast. Now finally I managed to open the whole hemline. First thing I did is getting rid of the shoulder pads. They're too much for my taste. I also release all the extra fixings that were made between the lining and the outer side fabric. After that, I put on the coat and try to understand how much width I need to take in to make the coat look well fitted to me. I pin the excess fabric away by using the existing princess seam as a guideline. so that I basically keep the same seam and make the alterations along that seam. My front seam only goes to the height of the pocket. To alter the whole coat evenly, I need to continue with my pinning all the way down to the hemline. The first pinning is only for estimating the amount of fabric I need to take away from the seam. Now I take off the coat and measure the amount I have pinned away. In the next step, I will pin the right amount on the inside of the coat to mimic the potential new seam. Do that on both sides, in the front and also in the back. For me, it's exactly 3 cm on each seam. Since I have the pockets in front, I can't take away the fabric evenly on both sides of the seam, but have to take away the whole 3 cm from the part of the coat that is closer to the middle. I marked a line 3 cm next to the seam and pinned that line together with the seam. That should look something like that. In my case, I also had to open the hemlines facing and fold that away in the same way too. I did the same thing with the back seams all the way down. After I pinned everything neatly, I flipped the coat to the right side again and tried it on carefully so that the pins won't poke me. So far everything looks very nice, but I decided to also take in the sides a bit, right under the armpits, to make the sleeve and the side seams a bit more tight. A quick stop here for everyone who doesn't have a coat with a princess seam or an extra seam dividing the shoulder line. If you don't have a princess seam on your coat, you can use the same technique by simply folding the fabric away vertically. Or if you have a vertical dart, use that one as a guideline. In the same step, you could also make the sleeves tight by re-sewing the seam. But now we go back to my coat. After I have pinned all 4 seams on the inside, I sew them together with a straight stitch. I make sure I sew next to the existing seam so that the old seam is all tucked in and won't be visible from the outside. I will tackle the fake pockets now. I made a little questionnaire on Instagram about why fake pockets exist. So far, I mainly got that one response that it is a gender issue. In my research, I actually found out that it is a historical gender issue that goes all the way back to ancient Greece. It basically says that women don't need to transport anything important, meaning the men would be the ones that would carry something like a wallet. Having no pockets would also encourage the handbag purchase, what makes women the perfect target groups for buying more. And then, of course, it would ruin the female silhouette if the pockets were real and would be actually able to hold some items. To sum it up, there are tons of reasons why fashion industry decides women's clothes shouldn't have pockets, and I don't like a single one of them. That's why I will show you how to turn fake pockets into real pockets right now. Most of them are actually perfectly fine pocket openings. They're just sewn together and have no actual pocket behind. So, making them real is easier than you might think. First, I measure the length of my pocket opening. I add 2 cm of seam allowance, and then I decided how deep they should be. The easiest way to decide the depth of your pocket is by measuring your hand from the hand root to your middle finger, and add around 2 cm so you can comfortably put your hand into your pocket. Also, you don't want them to be too big because it feels kind of weird if your fingertips won't reach the end of the pocket. This rule applies for coat pockets, but not necessarily for pockets on pants. They are usually a bit smaller and also round. In my case, I cut them out double on a fold, so I save myself 1 seam at the bottom of the pocket. Now I start this act of liberation by unpicking the seam that keeps the opening shut. It's right below the pocket lid. I start pinning one side of the pocket fabric into the upper opening side and sew it on, trying to hit the same line that I just unpicked. Now I also sew on the other end of the pocket on the other side of the pocket opening. I close the sides of the pocket with a zigzag and then a straight stitch. The zigzag should prevent the fabric from fraying too far. Make sure your zigzag is pretty tight. You can round the straight stitch in the lower corners of the pockets so that there's not too much dirt collecting in the corners of the pocket. It's a thing, trust me. Look at this. I do have real pockets now. So let's go back to making the last alterations on the side seam and on the sleeves. I mainly wanted it more form-fitted close by the armpits and then slowly go to the original shape further down the side seam. To keep it less bulky, I opened the lower third of the armhole seam and then individually sew the new seams from the sleeve and the side seam. always making sure that I take away the same amount from both sides and that they still fit together. The basic rules is that you always need to make sure that the circumference of the armhole matches the one with the sleeve. After sewing away the excess fabric, also cut it away, but still make sure that you have 1 cm seam allowance left. Now pin the armhole back together and close it with a straight stitch. Now I take the fabric scissors and go into all these new seams. Remember, I only followed them away and secured them with a stitch, but I haven't done anything with the excess fabric so far. Since we don't need that excess fabric anymore, I will now cut open all these folds and then cut them back to 1 cm. That is quite a bit of excess fabric here. Now what we have not looked at all is the lining. The lining obviously doesn't really fit anymore since we took away so much of the outside fabric. Since the lining doesn't have the seams I have been altering and only has the side seams, I decided to take everything in on these side seams. It is okay if the lining is still a tiny bit bigger than the outside fabric, so it won't overstretch and rip when you put on the coat. I sewed the lining also with a straight stitch, obviously from the inside. I cut away the excess fabric of the lining with a zigzag scissor to prevent the fraying of this delicate fabric. It also works without the zigzag scissors. You can either just cut it straight or cut the zigzags with your normal scissors if you're patient enough. The coat is almost done now. Before I reclose the hemline, I will give the new seams a proper press from the inside so that the two sides of the seam allowance will be pressed down, each on one side of the seam. And now, the closing of the hemline is done by hand, and it took me even longer than the unpicking. I pinned the whole lining in place, basically just the same way than it was before I opened it. The stitches I make here are called blind stitches, and the goal is that you won't see the stitches from the outside. So whenever you stitch into the fabric, make sure you push the needle not all the way through the fabric but only grab a few fibers. The whole seam will be in between the two layers and not on top. And here go! This is my new favorite coat. And it even has real pockets to fill up with all my valuable things I carry around by myself. On this before and after, you can see how well this coat fits me now and how oversized it was to begin with. I'm super happy how it turned out, and I'm sure I will wear it all the time. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you could learn something from it. I hope you could manage to alter your coat how I showed you. If you did so, please show me some pictures and feel free to tag me in any of your results. As you can see, I am not in my normal environment. I am in my mom's garden, and I'm using this opportunity to take some nice pictures of the coat and also finish up the video. So if you like my video, please let me know with a thumbs up or a comment, and make sure that you don't miss any of the upcoming videos by subscribing to Soft Skill Atelier channel. I see you next time. Bye!